What is the best species in Songs of Syx? Today we're going to talk about what species is best for beginners, best for military, and best for empire building, and all the minute details about each individual species in the base game. If you're new to the game, welcome. Songs of Syx is really cool, really complex, and just an insane amount of fun. You will get addicted, so please call a therapist. And if you've been here before, welcome back. I appreciate you being here in LaundryTown. I'm your mayor, Laundry. Now let's get into it. Now I'm going to go over some basic things really quickly, but if you've been here before, one thing I can ask from you, if you don't mind, go into the comments after you've seen some parts in the videos and help the other new players understand a little bit more about what's going on in the game. So if you have tips that I don't really highlight, or you'd like to talk about your own experience about what makes the game actually fun and work, I'm relying on you. So feel free to comment your best tips and tricks for all the new players. And for all the new players, after you've pressed launch on the little tiny pop-up window, you're going to go here into the main menu. To set up a game, go to play, go to random game, or if you'd like to do the tutorial, you haven't tried that, feel free to go to campaigns and try out the tutorials. They help, they're really good, they're not perfect, but you'll learn plenty of things from this video as well. Okay, so we're going to start and go to a random game, and then here you have some options about what you can choose. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to click on custom settings, all right? These are all the tiny settings you can change. I want you to not change any of them, and then press OK. You don't have to press any of these at all. You can just press go. All of these have different type of buffs and settings that are adjusted to make each individual game different, but we're just going to do vanilla as possible. So press go. That'll get you into the species select menu. This is what you came here for. So let's get into really quickly, what is the best race for beginners? Making it simple, there's a reason that they did Cretonians as the tutorial species. Each of these species you're going to have in this menu here have a little bit about the species, and then it'll tell you how challenging it is. For Cretonians, it's easy. It's easy because they're excellent farmers, they're law-abiding citizens, they enjoy food, drink, and services, and they want wood buildings and decorative trees. All of those things are relatively easy and have low barriers to get. What's great about Cretonians is that you don't have to worry about them being happy as much. If you generally feed them, they're probably going to be good for an insane amount of population. So if you're a beginner, feel free to try out the Cretonians. A little bit about them. I've heard a lot of people compare them to kind of like hobbits. So they're very peaceful, they're very kind of chill and laid back, but that also makes them have a couple of drawbacks. So for example, they're really bad soldiers. They're second-rate soldiers. So if you're planning on doing military conquest, you probably don't want to do it with Cretonians. You can do it with Cretonians. You can still make an army, and you probably should, but this isn't as powerful as some of the other species. They're also really bad at crafting, so some of those secondary production chains, they're not going to be as good as some of the other species. And so again, that means that, yeah, they're really easy early on, they can help you establish a pretty decent population, but then to satisfy those higher tiers and those gigantic populations, you are going to need those secondary production chains. And so they're not the best at that. They're not horrible, but they're not the best. And the last thing, this is important for you to know, they do not like the Garthemi and the Amevia, which we'll get into a little bit later. So if you're a beginner, pick up Cretonians, see how the game works, see what works and what doesn't, and honestly fail. Like, that's the part of the game I feel like people don't entirely understand, is you're supposed to not succeed all the time. It's supposed to be difficult. And it's also a sandbox, like you can change up things, you can try new things. The tutorial isn't really at a place, and there's really just too many tweaks that happen in between versions, because it is an early access game, to make it a nice, clean, and easy start for you. I think that these games are also somewhat difficult for people who haven't played colony sims or like grand strategy games before, because just like CK3 or any of the Paradox games, there's really not a clean way. There's way too many menus, there's way too many things going on for you to just know. And so this is a great species for you to just really mess up and learn the mechanics that way, as well as you can watch YouTubers like myself. Fiend is out there, Dendorian Times, I like Icon. They're all great channels that you can learn a lot from, and I have. So Cretonians, the best for the beginners. But what about for military? Let's say that you really just want to make the best military possible and just go on a rampage. Well, you have a couple of choices. Dondorians are really strong melee soldiers. Talapi are great archers and have high morale. But if you really want to have a good military, I suggest you go for one of these two species, the Amevia or the Garthemi. Let's talk about the Ameva first. So the Amevas, they're kind of like the fish people. They're obviously really good at fishing. They have a couple other things that are really important, but because they already have an innate strong soldier stat, that makes them easy early on soldiers. As soon as you get enough population to open up a training ground, you can throw like 50 or 100 if you're able to soldiers into that so they can train up, and then it doesn't take as much training to get to the same level of skill as it would for Cretonian. So Amevia is definitely the way to go. Let's go ahead and back up and let me show you a little bit more about what I mean. One of the other cool things about Songs of Syx, if you're interested in the military side of it, if you press play and then you go to quick battle, you can literally do a sandbox of just military stuff. So So we're going to clear all this out because I just want to talk about the base stats that you're going to get. This isn't going to be super in depth about military, but let's just talk about the species buffs. So over to the right, it talks about the different species you can look at, how many of the soldiers there are, some of their equipment, but down here are their actual stats. So let's talk about this one. This is their offense. So you can see for Amoebas, they have a 0.1, or basically a 10% buff to their offense. Kryptonians actually have a negative 10% debuff. That's negative 0.1 there. That's what that means. And so you can already see that offensively, Amoebas are much better. For their dexterity, Amoebas don't really have a boost. For charge, they don't have a boost. And for defense, and this is critical, they actually have a 10% debuff. However, for force, and this is really important if you're like charging the enemy, for example, they actually have a plus 20. That's gigantic. If you're going to look at the Kryptonians and look at this, the same thing with force, it's only a plus 10. So they give twice the benefit that you're going to get. What that equates to, we'll move this down to 50 because that's kind of the normal unit range that I use or unit size I use. Bigger is fine, especially if they're going to be infantry. What you're going to get is a total power of 54.56. Whereas if you did the same thing with the 50 Kryptonians, you're going to be basically 9 power less. Power is kind of one of the ways that they use to auto-resolve conflicts. Don't think about it too much. Amoebas are obviously better. But there's also another species that's really good, the Garthemi. Garthemi don't get a buff to offense, dexterity, or charge. They don't get one to defense, but it's not a debuff either. None from block, none for formation, and no additional effect from force. In general, you can see that the Garthemi, or the bug people, are also slightly worse than Amoebas. And so if you're going on a strictly military dominant run, Amoebas are really good. Another thing to talk about is morale. It's the thing that will make it so you don't break your formation when a charge is happening, for example. So high morale is really important. Out of the gate, there's no additional morale for Amoebas, but for Kryptonians, there's a -1 debuff here. And for Garthemi, there's also a -1 debuff. Now, out of all the species that have the best morale, it's actually going to be the Talapi. So those are the elf archers. Archers are really good. I actually made an entire video about trying to destroy an empire with Talapis. I'll link it in the description. But anyway, if you're going to go after a military conquest, my recommendation would be the Amoebas. You could also do the same thing with Garthemi. They're really fast. All right, moving on. All right, now that we know the species you should choose if you're going on a military conquest, let's talk about empire building. What species should you choose if you're trying to control the entire map? If I'm being honest, the best species for this, truthfully, is actually going to be the humans. Humans have a medium challenge rating. They're also unremarkable soldiers. However, if you're able to take cities and take down empires, you are still going to have to do something with the cities that you now occupy. And the thing about humans is that they're fantastic at research and administration. In my opinion, I don't think humans really get the love that they deserve. I know they're kind of a base general species, but in the mid to late game where you're starting to rely on your laboratories and on your administration for getting all those resources from those occupied territories, you can create an entire city that you don't produce any of the food at all. Everything is imported, which is kind of insane, but like that's truly what the mid and late game is kind of about. It's about using those occupied territories to sustain your main settlement, right? And because of that, humans are really, really strong. So if you're going for a world domination build, my recommendation is maybe you look at humans. However, we should take a second and talk about the elephant in the room. You're probably asking yourself right now, okay, well, I'm going to choose these guys, but if I choose humans, then I really won't be able to have a strong army. They're unremarkable soldiers, so it'll take me longer to get the army anyway. Even if I was trying to do the conquest, it'd just take a long time. So is there a way for me to get multiple species into a city? And there is. In fact, there's 2 ways that you can do it. Let's talk about them really quickly. This is my 2,000 population town. In general, the recommendation I have, especially if you're new, is to go with just one species for as long as you possibly can. The reason being is because not all the species like each other. In game, if you want to learn more about your species, which is insanely important, I recommend you go over to this right here, the plebeians button. Click on that, go to all plebeians, and you can press this question mark. What this does, it's going to take you up to basically the glossary. Everything you need to know about this game, it's got way more. And you can think about species right here. Each species, just like we saw at that intro menu, is going to have a little bit about them. But this one is also going to tell us a whole bunch more info about Talapis specifically. So one of the things I want to talk about is what things do the population like? Between these 3, they're generally all right with different climates, but they prefer temperate for sure. So let's say that you started with Talapis. What other species does it make sense for you to add? Well, you can see all the different species here, and they have a different colored background. Let's go to the Kryptonians. So for the Kryptonians, you can see that some of the species have a red background, some have a bright green, green, maybe a dull green, and then kind of like a dull red. From red to green is how much they basically like them, but you can also hover over them. So you can see that Crotonians really like Cantors. They have 100% preference, which means from the Crotonians' perspective, they would be happy to have Cantorns in their city. But they do not like Argonash, the Garthemi, or the Mevias, which means if you had them in your city, you're more likely to upset even your peace-loving Crotonians. They're okay with the Talapi, and they're alright with the Dondorians, and they're basically neutral to less than neutral with humans. And so let's say you start out with Crotonians, you could use this as a way to gauge whether you should bring in those other species. But then let's go back to the Talapis. So Crotonians are okay with Talapis, but Talapis are about mid with Crotonians. So it wouldn't be too bad. If you're going to have a multi-species city, you're going to need to know a couple of things. Where they're all living, where they're all working, and what their different preferences are. This matters with the type of food that you produce because humans like bread. Talapi don't care about bread, but bread is really important to humans. I don't have a grain production or bread production in this entire city, which means I either need to import it, and it's expensive, or I could produce it myself, which is a whole other supply chain. It's not impossible to do that. There's a lot of room on this map, but at the same time, it doesn't always make sense, especially if you're looking at the risk and reward. If you go to the plebeians again and then click on the question mark, it'll tell you, of course, their opinion about species, what religion that they like. It'll also tell you their food preferences, their drink preferences, what kind of buildings. This is where you go to learn more about your species. And at the bottom, it'll tell you what they're actually good at. So let's say that I wanted to have Talapi do my laboratories. Well, I can load down here in the laboratory icon, hover it, and it'll tell me two things. It'll tell me their fulfillment, so the Talapis have 75%, and it'll tell me the fulfillment of the other species. Based off of fulfillment, it looks like that the humans and the Amevias are both more fulfilled from this type of work. But from skill, you can see that humans are the only one that's actually better than us. So it makes sense to have humans in laboratories. Same thing with libraries. But if you go to hunters, for example, there's only one species that is more fulfilled from this than us, that's the Garthemi, and skill-wise, we are tied as the best with the Garthemi. Apple orchards, we're the best at them. We get the most fulfillment. Well, actually, the Crotonians get a lot of fulfillment, never mind. And woodcutters were also one of the best. So if you want to figure out about which species is great at which job, this is where you find it in this employment. Just kind of hover over it, see what the fulfillment is, and see what the skill is. The higher the percentage, the better. The end goal is to get your main species into industries that they really like. And you can see that if you go into your workforce. If you go to priority, you can actually sort by fulfillment. But you can sort by fulfillment, and then the jobs that make them more fulfilled are going to be the ones that they do first. But you need to be careful about messing up your supply chains, right? Like if no one wants to work in the warehouse, it's a problem, right? Now, if you just wanted to randomly add in your populations over here on the population kind of tab, if I right click over this is just for Talapis. I can set how many are allowed to come, but I can also do the same thing. So let's say I want a particular amount of Crotonians to come in, and I can go into the specific housing location. I can make a new house and say Crotonians are allowed to live here. You can also do that. So you don't have to do an intern run. You can do it just specifically with the species. If you're deciding to go down the intern route, you're going to need to look at their submission and happiness. That means you're going to need guards who are assigned very close by. Over in the human area, I put a guard right here. Nobody's in the guard post because they're at war, I think. You're going to want to put your guard posts. You're going to want to put amenities specifically for them. So you still need food stalls. You still need markets. You still need all that stuff. Give them a hearth, give them a well, give them a speaker. Like you basically still treat them the same way. The difference is that you bought them and you could buy more. And let's say you don't want to do the immigrations. You do want to do the interns. You can literally go onto the world map here. You can scroll down and you could pick any. So let's say that I really wanted to get someone to work in my farms a little bit more. If you click on the import settings here, down here you can go to either closest or best. Best would be like the best price. This is what it is. So they're selling each intern for 971 denarii or whatever. So that could make sense depending on what makes sense for you. All in all, here's what I suggest for you if you're thinking about the species that makes sense for the run that you want to do. If you're a beginner, do the Crotonians, learn how to farm. If you're interested in military domination, try the Amevias, try the Garthemi, or try the Talapi. Like the archers are really good. You can't do just archers. You need a lot of them. I proved that in my last video, but they're also still really good. If you're interested in second levels of production, do the Dondorians. They're so good at mining, and mining is really that next stage that you need. If you're thinking about an import food type city, like Dondorians are the way to go for sure. And if you're looking for like an empire builder, go for the humans. Regardless of what you choose, my recommendation is that you try one out and you try to make the world work for that species. Like really try to make that work before you bring in a second species. Because once you fully understand each species' needs, then you can focus on those and really build out your city that way. You'd be surprised how far you can go with just one species and how difficult it actually is to do a multi-species city. Let me know your favorite species in the comments. Tell me the biggest city that you've ever ever made, whether it's multi-species or if it was interns or no interns. And let me know what you thought about this video. If you liked it, I really appreciate a like and subscribe. I love playing this game and I love making the videos, but I just need to make sure that people actually enjoy them. So anyway, I appreciate you being here. Welcome to LaundryTown. I'll see you around.